Dr. Deborah Kuhn has a doctorate in cancer biology from the University of South Florida. She dedicated her postgraduate studies in the study novel chemotherapies for the treatment of multiple myeloma. At the University of North Carolina, at Chapel Hill, and at MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston. Dr. Kuhn has taught biology abroad in China and Vietnam, worked in the pharmaceutical industry, and taught at a college in West Texas before joining A&M in August 2023. And Dr. Kuhn, the floor is yours, and have a good presentation.
Great. Thank you, Armando. So this is a little bit of a divergence for me to be teaching a writing intensive course. So I'm going to discuss today about using artificial intelligence intelligently, or what I hope is intelligently, in a writing intensive course. So for those of you who are not sure what a W course is, um, first, Texas A&M actually requires undergraduates to have at least 2 approved courses. One of those courses has to be a W course. However, the other course could be a communications course or a C course, or they can take 2 W courses, and this is required um, for their undergraduate degree. So I'm thinking to myself, I did the University of Auburn teaching with artificial intelligence course. I think is 8 or 10 modules, and it took me a while to get through it. Really beneficial. I really enjoyed it. And going into before taking that course, I was anti AI 100%. Okay. It does not belong anywhere. But, and I think that the course was designed for people like me in mind, because it did change my mind in a limited way. But I had to be very cognizant when thinking about using AI in this W course because of the requirements. And so students have to have original words. So these are not all of the requirements, but these are the ones that are most applicable to the discussion here today. The writing has to be essential for the major. So, in other words, it needs to be centered in the biology department for me and, focus on science or biomedical writing in some aspect. And it should be the type of writing that the student would encounter maybe in their workplace if they stay in the field. Additionally, the student has to write at least 2,000 words, and these have to be original words. And furthermore, they have to submit a draft and then receive some constructive or formative feedback on that draft, have time to understand, um, maybe what needs to be improved and how to improve that, and then submit a final draft. And that's the draft that I then grade. The first draft is a pass fail. So simply if the student is able to supply the appropriate amount of information and requirements in that assignment, then they will get a satisfactory. And the TAs do a lot of these, but I also go in and try to grade as many of their first drafts as possible because I want them to know that I am invested in their education. So keeping these requirements in mind, I think it's useful then to think, what are some of the benefits of using AI in academic writing? And how can I incorporate AI into this W course and still keep all of these essential components? So one of the great things is it helps the student actually improve their writing. And here it says efficiency, and I think this is more along the lines of a student actually asking uh, a generative AI program to actually compose the actual work. Another great thing about AI is grammar and language use corrections. And I have a lot of students who are English is their second language. And I think AI is one the aspect of this language correction is one great use of AI for these students. And some of these grammar checker programs, like Grammarly, like Scribens, they already use an AI program to enhance language as well, and potentially enhance the quality of the content. I believe that that's really up to the user. So if a student were to use a generative AI program to essentially create the entire assignment, this is where the limitations of AI come in because it usually is nonsensical. It's actually sometimes very easy to spot generative AI writing because it doesn't flow. You tend not to see any errors in in it, and it's just sort of sentences um, picked from different parts of the internet, from other people's thoughts, and thrown together, and it really doesn't flow well. However, I do think an AI detection program is essential, especially at the university level, and we'll discuss that towards the end of my presentation. So, this is what I was worried about really the most is it can generate that content, okay? And I need my students to give me 2,000 original words. And they actually do end up writing more than that as well. But I think that AI could be used responsibly in my course manner, in a limited fashion. And some of the tools where I think AI would come in and be very beneficial in a W course would be like creating outlines for major projects. So I teach biology 403, but we also have biology 401 and 402. And in those courses, there is a major outline that is required. The students essentially work on the same project throughout the semester in those courses and work from that outline and build from that outline in their writing for the rest of the semester. Another great tool of AI is to cite appropriately in the necessary style and also provide maybe these appropriate citations. So I ask my students to cite in a particular style, and maybe half of them even read the instructions about how to cite like that. And so an AI tool would be great. They could say, please take these and put these in AMA format. And so I think that's a wonderful use of that. Also, plagiarism detection is another useful tool. But really, for the course that I'm teaching called Medical Narratives, which is to incorporate biomedical information with patient stories. I think having this ability to improve the style, coherence, and readability is the critical thing. So many of my students have really great ideas. They just have a difficult time putting that into words. So the two limited ways that I'm going to ask the students to use artificial intelligence this semester is they have to read a short medical narrative, and it's a great narrative, and it has some really great writing techniques. So the students are asked to choose two different kinds of writing technique, and then they actually write a 400-word essay on those writing techniques. And then there's a second part to that assignment, which is they're not allowed to use AI for, and this is where they need to summarize an original research article for a general audience. And I know this is very challenging for students to take a very high level um, article written for college graduates or postgraduates and essentially summarize that for an eighth grade audience. Now, I want them to do that on their own, so they're not allowed to use AI for that part of the assignment. But I did want them to be able to use AI to check that first part where they're essentially writing this essay on two writing techniques, because this is where I think it can help improve their overall flow. Not to mention, it's also beneficial to my TAs where they don't have to point out maybe every single grammatical error in the draft. They can simply put a point annotation there so that the student is aware that there is some type of issue, spelling, grammar, tense, punctuation, and they can use Chat GPT then to essentially check for redundancies, because this is something I think we all do, is we tend to use the same word over and over in our writing, and you tend to see the same word like story. I just read a student's essay, and they must have said story 45 times in 400 words. So this is a great area where sometimes the students are blind to it, especially if they don't have time to step away and let their brain rest before they go back to their essay and do more revisions. But now remember, there has to be constructive feedback on that draft. And so this way, the TAs and myself can focus our constructive feedback really on the structure of that narrative, of that essay in this assignment. We can talk about the introductory paragraphs, the body paragraphs, and then the conclusion paragraph, and really give them, I think, more substantial feedback in the areas of just writing well with the buildup of the paragraph itself and how that can, lend to the story. And so I would really just like the students to use AI here just to help the overall flow of their essay. Now, I will tell you, this is something that they could get just from copying and pasting this into Grammarly, but they don't do that. As a matter of fact, they don't even use the spell check all the time on Word. And it just sometimes I'm like, gosh, I know that word would have caught that, I know it would have caught that. So I think that this is just an extra step that I'm sort of giving the students so that they can see the areas where their writing could be improved, just the basic proofreading function. And also in the instructions that I gave the students for this assignment is that I wanted them to have Chat GPT highlight the areas that were changed so that the student can key into those. Now, I have another assignment after this one, and the students are not allowed to use AI for that assignment at all. But for their last assignment, they actually do have to create their own medical narrative. It can be truth or fiction. I got to tell you, I love the zombie ones. They're my favorite because I tell them it can be fantastical, if you want. So that medical narrative, and many students actually write about their own experiences or experiences of those in their family who maybe broke an ankle one time or tore an ACL, or I've read some really heartwarming stories, about parents who may be diagnosed with cancer and things like that. So, 1,000-word narrative, there has to be biomedical information contained in that because that is the whole point of a medical narrative. It's not only to be entertaining, but it's also meant to be informative as well. And now previously, I had the students, call PubMed, not call, but call PubMed and search for relevant biomedical information that they can incorporate. And previously, I let them either incorporate it by weaving it in the narrative. In other words, if they were to introduce pancreatic cancer, so and so was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, then there could be biomedical information like the epidemiology, the statistics, etc., and then they can cite that with an authoritative source. But I thought this is a great way for them to be able to use Chat GPT by asking Chat GPT to find those authoritative sources for them and then essentially ask it to print out 3 paragraphs worth, about 500 words. And now here's where the student needs to do some work is instead of allowing them to just have that as a block of separate biomedical information, I'm going to ask them to weave that into the narrative. So they're still going to be doing work here with that. And I think that some of the students are going to run into problems with this because they might find that the biomedical information found via AI might be inappropriate. It might not even be pertinent, to the story at hand. It might not be from websites, and when we're talking authoritative, I'm talking either peer reviewed or from a trusted medical source. And so I think that the students are going to see that there could also be some limitations here, but they're going to be responsible for the overall content. Okay, so this all sounds wonderful. But what we've just discovered is that Turnitin last semester, and I just started August of 2023, we used to be able to get a Turnitin report that had an AI detection. It was essentially using AI to detect AI. And I know that these tools are imperfect. And I know that there are many problems with AI detection, essentially. But I have to tell you, even if it is a crutch for me, I want that crutch. I need that crutch. So it's not visible to students, but it is visible to the TAs and the instructors. And this was all part of a beta package I could with this Turnitin Studio that was available on Canvas. But now they've made it a premium feature. So you know what that means. money, 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 and A&M did not want to pay for it. So without consulting anyone, as far as I know, any teachers who do teach writing courses, it includes the English department as well, uh, they didn't purchase it, and now it's just disappeared. So this has obviously caused some turmoil and uproar. And so I'm not sure if there's a solution at hand yet, but hopefully they find one soon.